So good morning, and thank you for joining the conversation around the Savannah water cooler. I'm your host, Marjorie Young, and
I'm your co-host, Christian Felt.
I'm so glad you can join us to help out today, Christian.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so today's topic is all about cybersecurity and what you need to know. And we are really fortunate to have Seimitsu's Chief Security Officer, Scott Scheidt, to give us some guidance on this growing problem. And it's a really big, dangerous problem. But before we get started, here are some stats that should get your attention to this very serious issue concerning all of us. Christian?
Yeah, so there are 2,200 cyber attacks per day.
And a cyber attack is happening every 39 seconds.
And 43% of cyber attacks are on small businesses.
And only 14% are prepared to face such an attack because they're super expensive too.
So 95% of cybersecurity breaches are attributed to human error.
And the average cost of the ransomware attack is almost $2 million.
And 1 in 5 internet users have been exposed to a cybercrime.
Well, just in time to help us navigate through this world of cybersecurity is Scott Scheidt. He is the Chief Security Officer at Seimitsu Corporation. Seimitsu is a company that's been around for 40 years here in the Savannah area. Scott, welcome to the Savannah water cooler.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. It's great to be here with you guys.
You know, we're really fortunate to have you. You have such an incredible background. Not only do you have a master's, you're working on a PhD, you got a background in with the military. Give us some of your background on how you with the cybersecurity.
Okay, yeah, sure. So as you said, I've going on, can't believe it now, over 30 years of military service. I started when I was 17, if I give you an idea what my age is now. But on the cybersecurity side, when I graduated from Armstrong in Savannah, the same year, a couple months before the war in Iraq kicked off, and I was commissioned as a military intelligence officer, and all that time during Iraq and what was going on with Afghanistan, the training that we got even back then was aligned to the Cold War doctrine, as we, the suspected fight that may come in dealing with Russia and its allies through Germany and the Fulda Gap and whatnot. And so we were in this environment in Iraq and Afghanistan that was coming up with new technological ways for the bad guys to communicate with themselves. Flash mobs were spinning up at the time in the civilian space, but they were being done through social media apps. And what was an app? What's an app? In the military space, it was, you use these things. These are the communication channels. This is how you go after bad guys. But just a quick example was I was taught in military training that if you want to quell an uprising or you want to try to limit the amount of social unrest in an area, you look for the guy with the megaphone standing on the highest point, a car, a house, a hill. You take that guy out or engage with that guy. And then when he's out of the picture, everybody else will just get hungry and tired and they'll want to go home because there's nobody to rile up the population. But that didn't work in Iraq, Afghanistan, and then through the world we're in now. And so it led me as a military intelligence officer to try to figure out, well, where is the guy with the megaphone? Because he's not standing obviously out here. Turns out, for shortness of the conversation, the guy wasn't standing on a hill with a megaphone. He was in a cave with a laptop with social media apps spinning up a flash mob 8,500 miles away in another direction. And so what has now become cyber, just in the last even 10 years or less than 10 years in some cases for the military, for even the civilian government space, was other things. It was electronic warfare. It was information operations, a little bit of psyops, a little bit of psychological operations, depending in your world, the marketing and sales, the branding of a message. And some of that has now rolled into formal cyber operations. But I came into cyber as a way to be a better military intelligence officer. And now it's just kind of complemented everything that happened. And then as I've grown through that in the civilian space, between working in academia, training soldiers locally at Fort Stewart, and then now being blessed by the leadership of Seimitsu to lead their cybersecurity team here. It's become part of an everyday, just 24/7 for me, way of life.
Absolutely. Gosh, well, we're so fortunate that you are here today to share some insights on what we can do to protect ourselves. So, so the first question I have is, how can you tell if you've been hacked?
Oh, that's a good question. It's not easy. It's even harder for those that aren't really paying attention to their daily their technical daily lives. Some people may not check their bank accounts on a regular basis. They may not do some personal checking online of their posture for dark web breaches. So usually when someone is hacked, their data, either if they're hacked directly off of a device or a personal email account or their banking information, that doesn't necessarily always go to the dark web, which I'll come back to in a second. But it may, if your data is in a larger data breach because a vendor that you use or a service provider, such as a medical facility, even an online app such as Adobe or LinkedIn or some type of social platform that we use every day, that many of which have been breached in the past, that data goes out onto the dark web. And so the two ways to answer your question, how do they know? Initially, you may get a message from your fraud department, from your bank. That's probably the fastest one. Myself as have received those as well. And so then you're going to see there say something like, well, we just wanted to check with you because we know you live in Georgia, but we see that your card just had $700 at 3 different Walmarts in Las Vegas make purchases. And you're like, oh, I wish I could go to Las Vegas, let alone have my card charged there, right? So that's one way that we see that people become aware that they've been hacked. Another is you can actually go to some what we would call open source websites. So an example, haveibeenpawned.com is a website that you can go to and just put in any of your emails, and it will tell you if that email is in any known commercial data breaches.
What is that again? Have I been?
It's have I been pawned?
PAWN.
It's pawned without an A. So everything sounds the way it sounds. Have I been pawned? But it's PWNED.
All right, I just put it up there. Oops.
Yeah. Yes. So it's yes.
Okay.
Have I been pawned.com? All that is together as one thing in the search bar, and you can go there. Now, the value of that is many people think about being hacked, and they're like, oh, they change your password, because they got my username and my password.
Yeah.
Most of the time that is okay, but some of these, when you go to Have I Been Pawned, you will see that sometimes the entities that get breached are like a third or fourth, what we call a third or fourth party connector. So let's say you pay your water bill, but whatever company you pay your water bill to, they have a service company that services that account, which is then a third or fourth level out. And if that organization gets breached, I've seen some where it's not just a username and password, but it's a username, password, address, phone number, next of kin, emergency contact. Like there's some that all of your information goes out in. And so those usually go out on the dark web, which is an area of the internet below our public access part that everybody does their work on. Interesting note, the public internet that we go into websites and everything is only about 10% of the full web that exists in the world. So that's another crazy point there, nugget of information. And so that other 85, 80, 90% is a deep web, which in the middle is kind of where like financial databases are housed, government, like private stuff that they don't want the public to get to. Even big corporations have like stuff that's not accessible to the public in what we call the deep web. But then the dark web is where all the bad guys hang out and play. And that's where credentials go to. That's where bad guys can go and do things like hire assassins and buy drugs and
Wow.
and human trafficking. But down there, they will sell credentials that come from public level breaches, and you know there's a whole market for the data that from a hack, like driver's licenses are worth, sell for $20 a piece. Social security numbers, sell for $30. And then there's just this conglomeration of pulling all of that as an aggregate together and being able to set up a case file or a case against someone. And so, by either being proactive and checking a site such as Have I Been Pawned, or you might get a call from the fraud department of your bank.
Okay. Chris.
So Scott, just how big of an issue is this, and what are the top tactics people are using today?
So it can be very bad. We're seeing some things where, for example, in years up till now, threat actors will conduct what's called a ransomware attack against, let's say, a hospital or a healthcare group. And so that's where they found a vulnerability. They've gotten into their systems and their networks, and they've basically encrypted their data. And let's say the hospital, the healthcare network, needs the key to be able to access that data again. And so they'll ransom that. They'll say, you have to pay us $1 million, and then we'll give you access to your data again. Most organizations will try to pay that if they can, just to try to save face, try to save brand, try to save what they can. Even though there's government regulations, compliance requirements that says they're supposed to let government entities and affected consumers and whatnot know. But to try to keep it internally, some have paid it in the past. We're actually seeing less and less want to pay it. But one thing we saw just in the last quarter of last year was there was a healthcare group that did not pay the ransom. And so it turns out the bad guys have started contacting the individual personnel whose healthcare data they have and trying to ransom or blackmail that person because they have their email, because they have their contact information. And they're saying, well, if you don't pay us something, whatever it might be, or if you don't do X, Y, or Z that we tell you to, then we're going to either sell your data, we're going to, sell it. And it's not just it may not be just a general, person. They're very, I hate to say it, but they're very good at going through the data they have and finding somebody that has a health condition that they think they would not want publicized, or they find somebody based on the information that's a senior leader in a corporation or a government entity or agency or something like that. And they're starting to go target directly those individuals because the healthcare environment may not actually pay the ransom. At the individual level, how bad could it be? You could have a whole set of credit cards, bank accounts, and very big purchases on your identity done before you even know it, if you're not keeping up with what your posture might be.
So
you asked some of the things that could be done or should be done. I would say I've talked to a lot of people lately who have come to understand the value of locking their credit reports. And so if you lock your credit reports, lock your accounts to the degree that you've got 8-10 credit cards, let's just say, if you only use one predominantly, lock the other 8 or 9 of them. Lock everything that you can through whatever your bank or your social settings will allow you to do. Many people have asked me about services like LifeLock and different things like that. They're good for those that need backups. I kind of tell everybody it depends on. I would say it's almost dependent on everybody's situation, because if you are proactive with some of the things we've even talked about so far, like knowing a site to go to look at where that information might be. Some of those services that you're paying for, you're really paying for them to do what you can do yourself if you have the time and the understanding. So I think it just depends on an individual's strength of ability to manage things themselves. And you've got to just be very vigilant about what might get accessed when you travel. Travel is a big thing. Connecting to airport Wi-Fi is not recommended.
Even plugging in your charging cord.
That's a new thing. We've talked about it in the security, space, professional space in the past, but it's actually become a reality now. Where there's been, I know last year it was talked about, where even plugging in your charger, because of the USB, you don't know what you're plugging into, and so just like the skimmers at ATM machines. When you put your card in and stuff, and that it skims the information or it monitors. The same thing with those USB charging ports. They could be connected to something in that seat setup that a bad guy or group or whatever comes by once in a while and retrieves it. Or there's a lot of Bluetooth capabilities in the world today, and it allows them to send that data to somebody's phone, or send it to a little device we call like a Raspberry Pi. It's a little server you can create and set up yourself, very cost effective, like $85. And you can just pull in all of the data while you're walking through the airport if you have these types of devices set up. So you have to be very conscious of where you're connecting to and what access you're allowing to have to your information.
Scott, we've got a question. What a timely topic and great info from Carmel Hearn. What tips do you have for social media users to keep their profiles from being hacked? And how would you catch and shut down the pretenders?
That is a great question, Carmel. So what we always say, social media is almost the lifeblood that we all deal with today, right? As far as our connections to each other and our family. But the tips that we always give on social media is, it's not so much about keeping your social media profile from getting hacked, although that can happen. The concern, most of the concern comes in your social media activities, that you don't put things out ahead of time. So you're going on a family vacation, share those pictures when you come back from vacation. Don't let everybody know that you're leaving to go on vacation and you're going to be gone. Even if you're posting on social media while you're on that trip, well, that's telling the bad guys nobody's at your house, or nobody's at your car, or whatnot, things like that. Also, there are threat actors that see that, and they're like, oh, well, this person's on vacation, so let's see if their data exists in a data breach. They can real quick, like I mentioned earlier, check a name, phone number, email address, and then see what's out there to see how that's associated with the social activities that are being broadcast and posted on someone's social media page. As far as catching the pretenders, if from that perspective we're talking about someone maybe like cloning or making a fake version in that aspect of a hack, that gets very time consuming from my experience in helping people and watching other people's stories. And it just becomes this issue of just trying to contact that social media platform and convincing them that this is not the correct, this is not you, you did not create this. And it really, I've seen it boils down to having to go through the steps and the measures that particular platform either has in its terms and conditions or has at the time for you to try to prove that it's not yours. I know people that have successfully done that. And it's frustrating. It's very frustrating to know that someone will go to that degree to do things against other people.
So we've got another question. What do you suggest about buying insurance for getting hacked?
Oh, that's two-sided, I would say. The biggest piece that we deal with regularly is cyber insurance for small to medium businesses. We have some enterprise level organizations that we engage with, but it's predominantly based on even like your statistics from the beginning, small to medium businesses. And we're finding that the cyber insurance expectations in either getting it initially or having a renewal has just exploded in the last couple of years. So I would say probably in 21, even coming out of COVID, if you were doing a cyber insurance review or renewal, it might be like 5 to 8 questions that would be on it. And then that would be all they needed. And now we're literally seeing like 50 plus questions just for the cyber insurance, where they're asking the details of everything. Do you have encryption? Are you using endpoint security? Do you enable, are you using multi-factor authentication? And then in some cases, they're wanting to know which specific vendor you're using, because the insurance companies are also following that there are some, hate to say it, there are some security companies that have been breached. And so if you happen to be using the tool from a company that also had its own security concerns, your insurance is going to, potentially go up as well. From a personal perspective, with the way that question is asked, I'm other than identity theft insurance, that's the area that normally individual cyber hacks or issues come into play. And I think that at least a discussion is valuable to be had by individuals, depending on the greater your net worth is in the space of, do you have something either as a business owner or as a senior executive of a business, or a very social, outgoing social influencer per se, or someone that might be a higher target. Not to say people that aren't either, but I'm just saying that the more presence that exists, the more it might be say, oh well, let's go check out and see what those guys are associated with.
So I got a question, Scott. So we talked about ransomware and how each case can range about $2 million. Would insurance cover that or no?
That's a great question. So we've had that. I've gone over that with some people before to try to explain to them why not just relying on cyber insurance is so critical. So for example, we would say a proactive strategy of making sure your cybersecurity program is built well, that has all the right pieces and they're running smoothly. Because let's say you do have a $2 million ransomware policy, let's just say, and the bad guys were to ransom you, and initially it's $1 million. Well, when all that stuff starts, you've got to go through the process of figuring out if it is a true breach, getting in contact with the insurance company, seeing what they're willing to do. And the bad guys will put time stamps, response times on these things. And we've actually seen where they'll say, you've got 4 hours to pay us this ransom, or we're going to delete 50% of your data. And, and trying to get people to move fast. Well, if you've got a $2 million policy and they've ransomed you for $2 million, the issue happens is that when you've exhausted that 2 million, several things are going to kick in. If you don't get them that 2 million, let's say if they told you 45 minutes and you get it to them at 47 minutes, we've actually seen them go ahead and do what they say and delete 50% of the organization's data. So now you were 2 minutes late, you're out 2 million, your insurance is going through the roof. Depending on the size of your company, you may be out of business in the next 6 months because you can't recover from this. You lost 50% of your data, which possibly means more than likely they deleted it from your databases, but they still have it in theirs, and they're still going to turn around and sell it on the dark web as it goes forward. So there's all kinds of dynamics that go into that. So having cyber insurance is not an end all be all. It will not cover, and you cannot, it will not cover everything you need. And you cannot expect that, I've got, $2 million worth of cyber insurance. If I get hit with $1 million ransom, I'm going to be okay. Because if you don't get them that first million in 45 minutes, let's say that they were to give you that, and then they say, okay, now it's going to be 2 million for the rest of it. Well, now you don't have 3 million worth of cyber insurance. You've only got 2. So where are you going to get this other $1 million to try to get the rest of your data back? So that's a big what if, but it's an example of how you can't rely on that. And so it's a good part of your defense and your cybersecurity posture, but it shouldn't be considered that if I've got cyber insurance, I don't need to worry about everything else because it'll just pay. Because that ransomware piece if you look in cyber insurance policies, ransomware is one of the pieces that your cyber insurance will cover. So it may be that you have a $2 million cyber insurance policy or addendum, but it may only cover 500,000 towards ransomware and 500,000 towards business email compromise and 500,000 towards something else, a compliance issue, the compliance space of how you were supposed to be structured in the first place. So it's not always that, like, for example, a $2 million cyber insurance policy covers the full ransomware.
Awesome. What other questions, Christian?
So Scott, for anybody watching this program today, what is the number one thing you or your company can do to protect from a cybercrime?
So I'd say the first step would be to understand what your compliance requirements are, if there are any. And what I mean by that is if you work in an industry, medical, for example, are you a covered entity, or are you do you fall under the business associate status of HIPAA, of the HIPAA security and privacy compliance? If you are a business that might meet the new expanded Federal Trade Commission definition of a financial institution, and that includes now accountants and tax preparers, some other ones in there, automobile dealerships are a new one. The reason why I say that is that there's now compliance requirements that go in more areas than before. So the first thing that I would recommend is understand if you have a compliance framework or standard that you're expected to be held to, because inside of those compliance frameworks are like black and white. This is what you're expected to have in let's say an information security or a cybersecurity program, and they will spell that out. And so meeting your compliance standards will help you build a cybersecurity program as well. And so really in support of that, what compliance standards does my business have to be in alignment with? And then what is my posture in association to that? And that can start with things such as, at Seimitsu, we can do a free dark web assessment to see where your professional and organizational data may be out on the dark web. And that can be a starting point to say, okay, we have to follow this compliance standard. We may have some issues already out here that we have to make part of the risk mitigation program as we move forward. And then you build that cybersecurity program in your organization to make sure that you're hitting those minimum standards of whatever compliance statutes that the government's going to expect you to have.
Well, Scott, you gave us a lot of information to help the small businesses that are watching this and just and our community. And if they have any other questions, how can they get in touch with you?
Oh yeah, you can contact us. Go to Seimitsu.com. Our cybersecurity page is Seimitsu.com/cybersecurity. But you go to that Seimitsu.com page, and we've got information there. They could call us directly. Our office number is 912-352-3689, and you'll get lovely Amber that would probably be on that initial call, but she'll get you routed to myself or another person that is available for whatever the specific question is. But yeah, we're here and available, especially for our Savannah community, our Savannah small business community. We are here to help you navigate all of this craziness.
Well, we certainly appreciate you being on the Savannah Water Cooler with such great information. Cybercrime is expected to, is it double again? I mean,
yes. Yeah. And as we go forward, we kind of kicked off what I call my peers, not just me, but we've kicked off the generation of AI, right? And the future is going to be very heavy with additional concerns for those as security professionals, but also for the general public. It's going to become much harder, I believe, for the regular public to believe what they're seeing or hearing. We've got deep fake videos where you can take a political figure and it's a video you can almost, you got to run it through an analyzer before you can prove that it's actually a deep fake. So just watching it publicly is going to be very hard. We've identified some options where there are people that will call you and you may say hello and begin to talk. and they're not they won't say anything back to you, but there's some tactics out there where they're recording your voice, just those little snippets of your voice, and just saying, hello, this is whoever, can I help you? And some of those become enough for AI to use in some type of correlation with other data about you to make calls or to
that's already happening.
Yeah. And so I've got a lot of concerns and trying to keep up with, AI's got great things. We use it in some resources, especially, social media marketing, branding and whatnot, makes things go faster a little bit and more eye catchy. But the deep technology side of that going 2024 and forward, we got an election year this year. We're going to be doing that election thing again. And it wasn't big before, and we saw what happened back then. So I think that's probably the biggest concern in how that might be used, how it might, be incorporated into some things that the everyday person may become more entrapped per se, or just caught up in something and just not realizing it because it's just not something they're used to. Some speaking engagements recently, I've had people confirm. I'm like, has anybody just started getting random, text messages that from just numbers that aren't in their phone and stuff that they haven't been, and they're like, and I just, okay, Chris, just block them. Don't respond to them. Don't engage with them. Just block them. There's also, though, when it comes to those text messages, there's a text that you can actually forward them by text to the Federal Trade Commission, and they will actually log those numbers as part of being something that people are concerned about. So that's a good thing that's out there on the government space side. But yeah, we're seeing a lot of that, and how that AI is going to increase that, and also at the identity theft level, the attacks on businesses. That's a concern we will have going forward. All
right. Well, with that, we are going to say thank you, and we will see you on the water cooler at a later date. Thanks.
Look forward to it. Thank you.
Everybody,
good day. Thank you
for watching.